it's a mixed bag with trees. I mean, too many of them tend to choke each other out. If they're in the wrong place, they have too much shade. But we all know what a beautiful tree looks like. We all know that helps. But one of the things that you talked about earlier that I think we should go back to is their impact on maintenance, because I think we're speaking to a group that has some concern about maintenance. And you know, you look at a tree, a big old oak, and you have to remember, by the way, for the members who will say, well, the tree may not be there, grow up until I'm gone. They take a while. Well, the trees that they have now were planted by somebody or by Mother Nature long before they were there, and you got to kind of pay it forward. But talk about some of the maintenance problems that you can have with trees so that people understand, and you know, how you try to ward that off. I was particularly impressed by you bringing out the arborist, and I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that in this context.
So we still have quite a few American elms left, so that requires an injection process that's every 3 years. We have to inject those trees in order to prevent the Dutch elm disease from taking them out. Pruning, cabling, you look at potential hazardous situations, or if the tree, how solid the wood is inside, whether it's hollow or not, the type of crotch, they call it the angle of the crotch, that the narrower that crotch is, the more hazardous it is. So sometimes you have to put a cable up there to ensure a higher degree of safety. And then, of course, when you get into drought situations, you know, you have to offer supplemental water to some of them sometimes. If you do root pruning like we do, you have to be mindful of that. So if you do have a droughty period, you have to supplement some water because you compromise part of the tree root. So it's like everything else in a golf course. There's systematic approaches that intertwine many different things, whether it's fertilization, water, pruning, cabling, and removing to ensure the health. Like for elms, if you get a diseased elm, part of the protection of the rest of them is sanitation. You got to get it out of there. So sometimes tree removal actually benefits neighboring trees as well.
And you know, there's other things you can do as well. If you have particular specimen trees, some courses do it. It's not that hard. You can hire somebody to put lightning rods in particularly good trees. We did that at our place, and the best tree on our golf course took a direct hit about 20 years ago, and it's still standing. We had to replace some wiring for irrigation, but that was a small price compared to losing a tree because it sent a lot of volts down into the ground. It's, and the other thing that Dan mentioned that I think we should emphasize a little bit is either with an arborist or without, you have to constantly maintain how healthy the big trees are, because if a big tree begins to lose significant limbs or even falls over, it's a real hazard. And I know that I was at Oak Park one time when about 40 minutes after I was on a particular tee, probably a 150-year-old oak toppled over, and fortunately no one was on the tee. At our course, members were complaining because we took out a couple of nice oaks which were near another and planted small ones, and they said, why are you bothering to do that? And we showed them what the inside of the tree looked like. It was hollow. These things happen, and you can't assume that they're all going to be here and healthy forever. You have similar issues, Dan?
Yeah, and I think you touched on something earlier too, and that's the species and how fast growing that species is, because again, reflecting back when Dutch elm hit, because that was a significant endeavor back in those days, many courses were really impacted when you're used to that many trees, and now suddenly, you know, you lose a significant amount of them. Is that the fast-growing trees, you generalize, which accurately so, that, you know, they tend to be shorter lived. So the golf courses that planted willows and silver maples kind of maybe at first thought that, you know, they were benefiting from planting those kinds of things, but certainly later on they feel, I bet you most of them felt like, you know, we wish we would have planted a different species of tree.
Well, I've always said that I could have made a lot of money if I could have bred a silver maple borer like the ash borer, because then superintendents could have gotten rid of all their silver maples, because most of you guys think that they're dirty and they're going to die faster than you want them to.
They're dirty, they're narrow crotch, so they're a weak tree, so to speak, structurally. So right. So there's a lot of thought that needs to go into it, I think, to make it work in the long run, both for agronomics and playability and safety, and for strictly economics.